This is an unrehearsed program. The views expressed are those of the guests and not necessarily those of the producer. Today's topic:
torture techniques and domestic surveillance in the award-winning program Passion for.
Welcome to another edition of Passion for Truth. The U.S. Congress is in the process of taking an important step against curtailing the systematic human rights violations and its handling of foreign prisoners. All such policies unacceptable even in a global war against terrorism. We'll ask our panelists next. Dr. Ujjwal Singh Bawa, Professor Emeritus, University of Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Dr. Bawa has written a number of books on Sikh history and Sikh scriptures. Dr. Walter Laundrie, a former State Department official who was a member of U.S. delegation that negotiated the American Convention on Human Rights. He is writing a book on emerging nations without a state. And by the way, his son-in-law won a Nobel Prize this last year. 5 years. John Waldes, President and Vice Chancellor of Central Buganda University, and Dr. Ashok Thakur, pediatrician and analyst from Northern Virginia, who does a lot of volunteer work and has great insights on the Russian politics. Welcome you all.
Thank you.
Starting with you, Ashok, do you sense the need for aggressive strategies to combat terrorism since September 11, 2001?
I think so. Terrorism has no justification in any form. And if terrorism is trying to rectify some of their grievances, it is no justification. I think the terrorism should be fought in all possible ways.
John, what do you say to the detainees who are tortured but cannot seek relief in a U.S. court?
I totally disagree with Dr. Thakur's take on this. I don't think that torture is permissible or should be permissible under any circumstances. Having seen torture firsthand, I can assure you that it's not a theoretical concept. It is a damaging thing that damages people psychologically, physically, and disrupts their whole family structure.
Walter, CIA, is it shocking to find that CIA cannot be held accountable for all the abuse of prisoners?
It can be held accountable. Why do you say it can't? I didn't follow the.
No, I'm just saying that are they being held accountable for the?
I would hope they are. Under our system of government, all agencies of the government must follow the law from the president on down. And if they are violating the law, it's the obligation of the Congress to investigate it and correct it.
Is it, Dr. Bawa, it's necessary to redefine torture and degrading treatment under in the war scenario?
I think so. It seems to me that the terms that we have been using, torture, let me distinguish between torture and coercion. For political and criminal prisoners, they were tortured or they were coerced physically just to get some punishment. But torture is an entirely different story. There we are torturing people to get information from them. Unfortunately, we have been completely unsuccessful in the last several years. Nobody knows still. We have got so many of the comrades of Osama bin Laden. Where he is he now? Therefore, I think the torture as it is not paying the results that we expected from them.
But
when you're tortured, you will admit to anything. You will give whatever false information that may have a semblance of truth in it, just to stop the torture that's being inflicted upon you. You don't get the truth. And that's, as was mentioned, that's why we don't know, and why the whole concept of torture is such a negative and backwards way of getting information. There are better ways. There are much better ways, and good interrogators can get a lot of information without ever torturing anybody.
And in addition, I think we don't want American prisoners tomorrow to be tortured because we are torturing them. And I think to that extent, I agree with John McCain and Ralph Feingold's amendments in the Senate.
This reminds me of a Russian story. Stalin once lost his glasses, and he asked his KGB chief where he had to find the glasses. He said somebody had stolen them. So he went to his office, and after some time, Stalin found his glasses back, and he called him and said, "I found my glasses." Well, 3 people have already admitted they've stolen your glasses.
Well, the thing is, we are wondering whether we should redefine torture and degrading treatment under specific circumstances of war to get the information.
My answer to that would be no, no, and no. Those are my 3 answers, and they are emphatically no's, because, as I said before, they don't give us the information that we need. They are degrading. They are an infliction upon a person which has no right in law or in any kind of civilized society.
Okay, Walter, tell me, waterboarding, simulated drowning, hypothermia, mock executions, are they examples of severe torture?
They are examples of close calls in terms of torture, but I don't think it's the appropriate things to use, as John has just pointed out, for a civilized country like the United States. The Congress provides, there's a special tribunal that the president can actually do something that is doubtful and go to the courts within 72 hours and get a clarification, and they can tell them don't do it anymore in an emergency. That's about as close as I would go to the situation of permitting extraordinary means to achieve information. We are hopefully a civilized society, and we are doing several things I think are not appropriate. And I think it's up to the Congress to clarify the situation, and we should not have a president as a dictator for 4 years just because he's commander-in-chief. That should not give him carte blanche on all topics.
How do you, Dr. Baba, compare these torture techniques with Indian prisoners?
Well, I think, first of all, the U.S. is a country of laws. We have laws in this country for or against torture, as it is. If anybody violates that, including the president, then he's questionable on that. Unfortunately, similar laws do not exist for some of these developing countries like India. I can recall back in 1920s when the Indian independence movement was started, one of the Sikh leaders by the name of Baba Kharche was arrested by the Britishers and put in a solitary confinement in a cold temperature with absolutely no heat and no arrangement except only for one blanket. That was torture. But that was only just a punishment for his political views. Similarly, lately in the 1980s, Forbes and so on, 2 people, Simarjit Singh Maan and Professor Dushan Singh, when they were arrested for their political views, they were also really physically tortured. But there are no laws in India against torture as such. We are signatory in this country to some of these international organizations where the prisoners have to be treated more civilly, more in more dignified way and more humanly.
Are you saying that India uses these torture techniques and they are covered by its constitution?
I did not know that the Constitution. I don't think the Constitution provides that allowance. This is only. And so when the Britishers left India, most of us, those who really courted arrest and so on for political reasons, we were tortured with the sticks and so on, but not the thing that we are talking about here, drowning and hypothermia. In fact, hypothermia was for Baba Kharche. When he came out, his nails and everything, they were gone. He was really severely tortured. And in fact, Mr. Gandhi said at that time that with his arrest, the movement of Indian independence had just begun.
So how do you compare these torture techniques with Russian prisons?
I don't have any idea, but this example of Stalin and KGB torturing and getting confessions from people and then executing them. It starts with an assumption that when a person is put in prison or has been captured, it is assumed that he is guilty. And what all these things, what they need is to get a confession from him by hook or crook. And torture is one of the oldest and perhaps the most effective way of getting a confession of things which have already been assumed to be happening.
We don't seem to have learned much over the last 500 or so years. We had something called the Inquisition, where they refined torture to an art, where people were drawn, stretched, they were cut, they were bruised, they were all these things that we use now, plus many, many more. And they got no information. They got no real useful information, and because people would simply say yes or no, or it's my neighbor. Salem, where we had the witch hunts, the same sort of thing. One would accuse the next one, who would accuse the next one. It was just getting out of control. This is not the way to get information. This is not the way to punish a person either. Putting somebody in a cold, damp cell with only one blanket is torture. Basic requirement. I don't think that anybody on this panel or anyone in the audience think that prisoners need to be receiving Rolls Royces and caviar for lunch, but they do need some basic things: a clean room, a bed, food. Those are requirements from any country, from any nation, and especially from this country, who takes such delight in telling other nations how wrong they are.
Well, Walter, do you think there should be a statutory requirement that all CIA interrogation methods be submitted to Congressional Intelligence Committee for review?
Well, the congressional committees can already investigate that. They have the right to do that. It's not a question whether the procedure for the Congress to investigate things like this. They have their own procedures. I think they are attempting to do it to the best they can, but it's not something that it is part of the system of our system of government. It's done already, or it's always continuing review of the executive actions are under continual review. As to whether the question that has arisen is that the president has assumed that he can go beyond the 72-hour rule and not report things in that, and that is a dispute in the Congress right now about whether he has some kind of executive authority over and above the 72-hour deadline for reporting to this special court. That is the issue right now.
We will be right back. Stay with us. This is Passion for Truth. In third world countries where we have several episodes of terrorism, the standards of torture are consistently redefined. Why is U.S. criticized when it redefines standards for torture only under specific circumstances? We're going to ask our panelists next. Walter, why is U.S. criticized? Third world countries do it all the time. Clear examples of torture, putting chilies on the salt wounds and all that. But U.S. does it only when under certain circumstances. Why is U.S. being criticized all over the world for its?
Well, because we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And if we hold ourselves to a higher standard, we should be criticized if we violate the standard we hold ourselves to. And the standard that the Congress adopted is that in close cases, if you apply something above and beyond the normal routine, you're supposed to report to the courts within 72 hours. In an emergency where you feel like you need to do something, then you're supposed to report. And if you say you're above that, then it's time for the Congress to do something about it. And we should be criticized. We should be held to a higher standard.
Do you agree with this premise, John?
Yes. When Bush came into power, he was constantly pointing out the moral high road of his administration. The moral high road does not allow for any kind of torture. at one time, the other part of this is at one time the United States was the envy of the world because things were moving along so well. Right now, we're being questioned on a lot of things because a lot of the things have collapsed. A lot of the things that we've refuted in other countries have become part of our arsenal of doing things, and that's where we are having problems.
So, Dr. Baba, if we are willing to accept two different standards of torture for two democracies, and we are quite content with that in Indian prisons, for example, they give you worst examples of torture by putting chilies in your wounds, by torturing you day and night for getting the information. But in U.S., we do that, and we invite international disgust. Are we talking about two democracies and two different sets of standards for torture?
No, I don't think so. I think the torture is the same whether it's here or Timbuktu or somewhere else. When human beings are being mistreated and maltreated for political activities, then I think we have to be very careful that punishment is not going to be just to take revenge on his body as such. It's a matter of principle here. I disagree with somebody in my views. That doesn't mean that I should be tortured for that. That's different. But if I have got bad intentions to overthrow the country, then it's a different story. Then, of course, in that case, there are ways to question, get the information out of those. But I think when we want to compare U.S. with third world countries, this country, as I said earlier, is a country of laws. And we believe in that. Other countries may or may not have those laws. That means there are laws, they may not be following that closely. Luckily, in this country, we have a watch and guard in the Congress to what our big executive branch does. And therefore, to that extent, I think we are more answerable to our actions than the third world countries are.
We're going to shift the gears a little bit and talk about domestic surveillance, warrantless surveillance. Will it help to cover and uncover disrupt terrorist plots? What about that, Ashok? What do you think about domestic surveillance and warrantless surveillance?
Every tool of security has a justification and has some drawbacks. And surveillance is one of a very vital tool which could possibly prevent any catastrophic terrorist attack. So how and when it can be justified and when it should be not overused or misused, that's a very crucial question which we have to answer all the time.
John, will it uncover plots, disrupt terrorist plots?
Well, I have difficulties to begin with the whole domestic surveillance and the intrusion into people's lives. What about civil rights? Don't we have a civil rights? Again, just like torture is not the way to get information. So these surveillances, etc., may not be the way to get the information you need on the domestic front. There are other ways, and there are better ways. There is a system in place that Walter alluded to, whereby you can someone who needs the information because of things they found out, that can go to a court and get a warrant to be able to do this. And in certain cases, okay, that may be necessary. But I think if you look at the number of spy cases, domestic spy cases that have come about in the last few years, you realize it has gone way beyond the bounds of reason, that everybody's spying on everybody. Someone on one of the news broadcasts said that we, on an average day in Washington, D.C., are photographed 75 times by various cameras, etc., either hidden or very visible. That's too much.
What do you think, Walter, using National Security Agency using wiretaps, illegal wiretaps against people just because they want to find the traps Muslims tied to Al-Qaeda?
Again, I'll say that there is a law that if it's a questionable type of thing to do, you can go ahead and do it, but clear it with a court within 72 hours. It's an exception to the law, which should not generally be practiced. I want to go back to the torture business. I think it's bad And I think it harms our foreign relations in Latin America and in Europe when we send or keep a prisoner in Guantanamo so that he doesn't have access to U.S. courts, and we are charging him. I think this is a terrible thing. The new Chancellor of Germany is in Washington right now. She has criticized the president for this and says it's time for the U.S. to begin to shut down Guantanamo. It looks bad when all of the torture or supposed torture that may be happening in Guantanamo is by Americans. And so I think it's counterproductive, totally.
Where do you come on, Bishop?
Well, I think this is a very basic question which we have to answer all the time. When it is okay and when it is not okay. And that needs a very crucial scrutiny by all the people who are in power and who have been vested with the power. So that would be an ongoing question which will never have a yes or no answer.
I think the real question is, Dr. Bauer, do we have a legal mechanism to balance the national security needs with the rights of defendants?
I am not quite sure. I'm not a legal expert on that, frankly, but we should have. If we don't have, then we should have. Namely, that the laws can be amended, and this is within the Congress's power, to really make sure that our national security is not at risk at the cost of giving some leeway to the terrorists and for effects. Therefore, some laws can be amended, that can be regrouped again, so as to accommodate both these targets.
We have the legal system already. It's called the civil rights.
Yeah.
And as the doctor said, there are certain times when we have to make special allowances because of different things that came up. But basically, I compare it to a game that's being played on the football field. If we don't know the rules of the game, we can't perform. And if we don't know the rules of surveillance and of the rights of defendants, we cannot operate in a civil society. So any modifications, amendments, or changes of the law should be debated in Congress so that everybody has an idea, what is it now? This is what it was, what is it now? So that we can act accordingly. But a lot of that has not been done in the last 7 years.
We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to the Passion for Truth. If the president, Walter, had believed so much on this domestic surveillance and other authority to uncover the plots or disrupt the plots, he could have gotten the authority under the Patriot Act. Do you not think he...
Well, the Patriot Act was enacted after 9/11, 2001. It was enacted after that. The issue right now is certain amendments to the Patriot Act that are before the Congress. But the president has argued that he has inherent authority, even if it's not written in the law, to do certain things. And that is the issue, and the Congress has attempted to give him a little leeway by saying you got 3 days to report to a court if it's a questionable authority. Otherwise, we're going to hold you accountable. And that's where it stands right now.
A dictator has those rights too. He assumes rights that his country never gave him. That's the mark of a dictator. And I thought we lived in a democracy where people make the laws and people carry out the laws. When any branch of the government, whether it's the White House or any other, assumes powers that they don't really have, we're heading towards a dictatorship, and we better watch out.
Where are you on it, Dr. Ball?
I agree with both these gentlemen here. I think the President knows very clearly that there's a 72-hour limit that within which he must have a warrant before he can really question the American citizens, at least. And obviously he has been violating that all along. And that, I think that needs to be questioned, and it's being questioned, and I hope something comes out of that in favor of the public as such, the people as such.
We'll be right back with the closing comments. Stay with us. Passion for Truth. Final thought from each of our panelists. Starting with you, Ashok, are these programs being abused? You think they tend to expand beyond the purpose for which they were created?
I think there is a possibility of they being abused. Say out of 1,000 people that are listening, if one person turns out to be a culprit, whether it's justified or not, that's a question.
I think Guantanamo Bay is a very good example of how this whole thing has gotten out of hand, where people are imprisoned without any charges. We have had for years, centuries, and before that from the British, the right for a prison to be charged within a certain amount of time. There's the habeas corpus law, and we are setting that aside completely in Guantanamo Bay. I think that's a scandal that needs to be addressed.
One positive note that the administration is doing now is that they are vastly increasing the amount of funding for the study of foreign languages in this country. It's been a shocking thing for many years that we have neglected the study of foreign languages, and there's the new appropriations that were just submitted in the last few days is calling for a vast increase. I think they're particularly emphasizing Chinese and Arabic, but I would extend it even more.
Dr. Bowers, you have the last word.
Well, I think what we are currently following as it is certainly unacceptable in its present form. It needs to be amended so as to really make a balance between the national security and the danger from the terrorists. I think the Congress is on the right track at this time, and I think the President has to acquiesce to whatever changes that they're trying to make now.
And that's all the time we have. We'll bring you another edition of Passion for Truth next Saturday and Sunday. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all.
If you have any question, comment, or suggestion on this program, please send us an email at mschawla@hotmail.com or write to us at 1011 South Meadow Lane, McLean, Virginia, 22101. You can also access these TV programs and the radio programs archived on the Internet at your own time on the Internet at our page www.passionfortruth.com. Please watch GTV programs every week at the same station and at the same time, and send your comments to mschawla@hotmail.com.